版12月17日新発売。
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Player One Start. Today we're going to talk about Mega Man for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This game was released as an exclusive for the Famicom in Japan in the mid-1980s. And it has since sprung into a lucrative series that Capcom is still making entries in to this date. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the history of the development behind this game. Mega Man was originally released as Rockman in Japan and renamed as it made its way over to the United States as Mega Man. Personally, I believe they made the right decision, because I don't think that if he was named Rockman here in the United States, he would have had the appeal to a broad base of gamers. This game was released in 1987 and is classified as an action platform video game. It was developed and published by Capcom for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was directed by Akira Kitamura, with Nobuyuki Matsushima as the lead programmer. And this is the first game in the Mega Man franchise that, as a franchise, has sold almost 34 million units worldwide. Before Mega Man, Capcom primarily made arcade games, and their console releases were mostly ports of those titles. In the mid-1980s, Capcom made games to develop Mega Man specifically for the Japanese home console market. They decided to bring in fresh young talent for the small team, including artist Keiji Inafune, a recent college graduate who started on the Street Fighter team. Inafune recalled that the Mega Man development team worked extremely hard to complete the final product, with a project supervisor and lead designer who sought perfection in every possible aspect of the game. The development team for Mega Man consisted of only 6 people. Inafune designed and illustrated nearly all of the game's characters and enemies, as well as the Japanese Rockman logo, box art, and instruction manual. He was also responsible for rendering these designs into graphical sprite form. When designing the now iconic protagonist, Inafune recalled that he was influenced by a manga cartoon, Astro Boy. Mega Man is colored blue due to the technical limitations of the NES. The color has the most shades in the console's limited 56-color palette, and the expanded selection was used to enhance Mega Man's detail. Although he is often credited for designing the character, Inafune insists that he only did half the job in creating him, as his mentor developed the basic concept before Inafune's arrival. The basic sprites for Roll and Dr. Light were created before Inafune joined the project, and the designs for Cutman, Iceman, Fireman, and Gutsman were all in the process. Aside from normal enemies, Inafune's first character design was Electman, inspired by American comic book characters. The artist has commented that Electman has always been his favorite design. The designs for Dr. Light and Dr. Wily were based on Santa Claus and Albert Einstein. The latter character was meant to represent the archetypal mad scientist. Before settling on Mega Man, the team had considered such names as Mighty Kid, Knuckle Kid, and Rainbow Man. The name Rainbow was considered because the character could change into 7 colors based on the weapons selected. The production team chose a music motif when naming the characters in Mega Man. That is why the protagonist's original name is Rock and his sister's name is Roll, a play on the term rock and roll. This type of naming would later be extended to many characters throughout the series. The plot of Mega Man takes place in the year 2000 and X. Robots developed to assist mankind are commonplace thanks to the efforts of renowned robot designer Dr. Light. However, one day these robots go out of control and start attacking the people. Among them are 6 advanced humanoid robots made by Dr. Light for industrial purposes: Cutman, Gutsman, Iceman, Bombman, Fireman, and Electman. He realizes the culprit is his old rival Dr. Wily, who plots to take over the world. Unsure what to do, his helper Rock, having a strong sense of justice, offers to be converted into a fighting robot to help stop Dr. Wily, becoming Mega Man. Throughout the game, he defeats the 6 robot masters and recovers their central cores. And then, with their abilities in tow, he confronts Dr. Wily. One of the original storylines considered by the team, but not used in the final game, was for the game to have Roll be kidnapped and Rock had to rescue her. Another idea had included a boss fight against a giant Roll at the end of the game. The team decided to incorporate anime elements for the game's animation. Inafune explained, Mega Man's hand transforms into a gun, and you can actually see it come out of his arm. Quote Inafune, We wanted to make sure that the animation and the motion was realistic and actually made sense. So with Mega Man, they had perfected this blending of character with animation ideas. The gameplay of Mega Man was partially inspired by the game Rock, Paper, Scissors. The project supervisor wanted to make a simple system that offered deep gameplay. Each weapon deals a large amount of damage to one specific robot master. Others have little effect against them, and there is no single weapon that dominates all of the others. Mega Man was originally able to crouch, but the team decided against it since it made the player's ability to determine the height of on-screen projectiles more difficult. Naoya Tomita began work on Mega Man's scenic backgrounds immediately after his Capcom training. Tomita proved himself amongst his peers by overcoming the challenges of the console's limited power through maximizing the use of background elements. Mega Man's music was composed by Manami Matsume. He was able to create the music, the sound effects, and program the data in 3 months. When the game was localized for distribution in America, Capcom changed the title of the game from Rockman to Mega Man. This name change was created because of Capcom's then senior vice president did not like the original game, saying that title was horrible. However, other sources claim that this change was to Capcom's belief that American children would be interested in a game with the latter title. Critics at the time received Mega Man very well, however the game sold poorly commercially. Capcom's sales department originally believed that the game would not sell well, but after Japan had received limited quantities, it had been seen as successful enough to warrant a quick conversion to an American localization. As part of the quick conversion, the president of Capcom USA told the marketing representative that it had to have a cover done by the next day, so he had a friend draw it within about 6 hours. Inafune blamed the game's poor North American performance on its region-specific cover art, which visualized elements not found in the game. Mega Man himself resembles a middle-aged man rather than a boy. His costume is yellow and blue instead of being entirely blue, and he is holding a handgun instead of his arm having his trademark arm cannon. Over the years, the cover art has become infamous in the gaming community. It has been considered one of the worst game covers of all times by publications including GameSpy, Wired, and OC Weekly. The cancelled Mega Man universe featured a bad box art Mega Man as a playable character. However, since that time, bad box art Mega Man has become a playable character in the Street Fighter X Tekken series. Now, usually when researching Nintendo Entertainment System games, I don't find a lot of information about the making of, because this was at a time when video gaming was really still in its infancy, and there wasn't a lot of behind-the-scenes coverage of video games like there is today. But I think that because this franchise is so beloved by so many people across so many generations, that they've actually kept some of the stories alive about the whys behind the game that was made, and I think that's actually really good because I really enjoy going back and researching this story. But that said, let's go ahead and jump into some gameplay and see what Mega Man is all about. When starting up the game, we are treated to a static logo screen rather than having an introduction to the story. And you will notice that I am actually capturing this for my Nintendo Switch rather than the NES. And that is mainly due to the fact that I'm not very good at this game and I don't get very far throughout the levels without having some of the additional features added in the Mega Man Legacy Collection. As this is my first time making it through this game, I decided to look up a game guide to see what is the recommended order of taking these bosses. Again, this is not necessarily the right or the only way, but this is the way that I chose based on the information I've read. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with Bomb Man. This stage starts out like all of the others. You are defaulted to the Mega Buster weapon, but currently I don't have any more weapons to choose from. Each level is a side-scroller, but can also scroll it vertically in certain parts. Immediately, you're almost over-bombarded with enemies as they keep coming and spawning when you stand in certain parts of the screen. Destroying an enemy will either reveal some health, some ammunition for a weapon, and can occasionally have other things such as extra lives. At the very top of the screen, you can keep track of your score throughout the game. This was actually removed in later games because it actually serves no purpose whatsoever, not even to the point of rewarding you with extra lives for hitting certain point values. On the top left of the screen, you'll notice a life bar. If you have a weapon that has limited ammunition, it'll put that bar right next to your life bar. And when you get to the boss stages, it'll put their health meter on the other side of Mega Man's life bar. One annoying feature in this game, and in every Mega Man game, is every time that Mega Man gets hit by a projectile or an enemy, he is thrown back. As there are several points in this game where you have tight platform jumps you need to make, getting hit by a projectile can easily knock you off those stages and make you lose a life. There are not that many lives in this game, and that's why I'm using the Mega Man Legacy Collection, because that way I can save states in this game and continue from where I left off rather than having to start the game over again. And again, for those tight platforming jumps, if you make a mistake, you can easily press a button to rewind your gameplay back to the point where you can try again, rather than having to start all over from the beginning. Overall, I didn't find this stage too difficult to complete. Bomb Man is actually very manageable to defeat with just your Mega Buster. And once you have defeated the Robot Master, you are taken back to the main screen. Now, because I played other games in this series, I know that I actually gain the ability from the Robot Master after I've defeated him, but this game actually makes no mention of that at all, and if you hadn't played that before, you might not even know that you were given some other weapons. With that said, we're free to move on to the next stage, which is Guts Man. Guts Man starts off very similar to Bomb Man. That is, until you get past the first few enemies, and you are introduced to a new mechanic in the game, and that are these platforms that you have to ride across the screen. This is where that precise jumping really has to be mastered. And rather than watch all the times I failed in real time, I'm just going to speed up the gameplay process, where I had to rewind several times when these platforms just dropped out from underneath me, or I just barely didn't get the jump on time. In this stage, I also first tried to use one of the other weapons that I gained, and since I only have Bomb Man's weapon, I went ahead and tried that, and I found that this weapon isn't really effective, especially on enemies that have to move around, because there is a huge delay between when you throw the bomb and when it actually goes off. So again, this also requires a lot of precise timing, and this just really shows how Capcom really wanted you to perfect your gameplay and master it, and only those who truly master the gameplay would be able to continue. That is until they release the game with a rewind button, in which case it makes the game manageable for the rest of us. This stage also includes a gotcha moment, which would be a lot more painful to endure if I didn't have the rewind button in this gameplay, but in the original game this would have been something that would have made me throw my controller down in a rage. One of the paths when you're dropping down is centered directly over spikes, so you have to know going down that that's going to be there, or else you'll hit those spikes, you'll die, and go all the way back to the beginning. And this is just before you start getting to the point where you're going to confront the Robot Master. So I just consider that to be a bit cruel, and I don't know how the person who designed this level can sleep at night. And this is the first level that I confronted one of these big eyes on a pogo stick. These things take too many hits and are best avoided, so if you can get them to jump at just the right angle, or you can jump over them or get underneath them, that is the best way to get past them. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot of damage. And starting with a full health bar, I think it only took 3 hits for them to kill me, so the risk of defeating these things is not really worth the effort. Moving on to the boss fight, there are a couple things to take note here. First off, whenever he slams into the ground, you actually can't move and you're stunned for a little bit. That can make him drain your life bar quicker than anything if you're not paying attention to his movements while you're throwing the bombs. Throwing the bombs at this person does deal a lot of damage. However, I do note that again, since he moves around so much, placing your bombs in the right spot is actually hard to gauge. But after a few well-placed hits, his life bar does get drained, and this Robot Master is now history. So believe it or not, so far I've actually shown you a condensed version of an hour of gameplay. So I actually took a break, and when I came back I decided to look through some of the menu features of the Mega Man Legacy Collection, and I decided that the game looked a little bit better taking up the entire screen and having the border on the sides. I didn't like the look of it when it was stretching it to full screen, so this actually looked better for me. The path to Cutman takes you through an abandoned industrial factory. To reach him, you have to climb to a rooftop and then over a tower. When first arriving in this stage, you may notice several blocks laying around, so since we've acquired Gutsman's super arm ability, you can pick them up and toss them at enemies. However, at this point, I'm not actually going to do that because it's going to lower the amount of times I can do that, because every time I pick up a block, it decreases the amount of times I can do it. Also in this stage, you will encounter a lot of these wall guns, which you can destroy, but if you can get through it without taking too much damage, I actually prefer that way because you'll spend more time trying to kill these enemies than it would take just to try to avoid them and figure out the pattern and just go through the stage. The same go for these objects that are attached to the wall and move back and forth. Again, if you can avoid them, great, but there are a couple of them I had to take out so it would make it easier for me to go through the level. All in all, I didn't find these the most frustrating or difficult parts of these levels, but I did find them the most time-consuming. Towards the end of the level, you will encounter these little hamburger-shaped things that shoot bullets out in multiple directions. Again, destroying these versus just avoiding the projectiles is the strategy you may want to use when passing this area. Then we'll go past our Big Eye Pogo Stick, and we're at the end of the level. There are two strategies that can be used to defeat Cutman at the end of the stage. You can switch over to your Gutsman suit and throw the blocks at him, or you can just use your blaster and just keep hitting him. It's not that hard to avoid his little scissor things he throws at you, so either strategy will work fine. The Rockman stage takes place in an extremely tall tower that Mega Man must climb high into the sky. You start out in this area where these things are roaming around the floor, let's call them evil Roombas. Previously, you could not destroy these, but now that you have Cutman's weapon, you can easily take them out. Well, I say easily, but it takes a little bit to aim the projectiles at a spot where the enemy is going to be, but it's not too bad overall. The next enemy in this stage are these electronic beams that shoot out, and take a lot of your health if you're hit. Again, this is a point where I'm thankful I have the rewind button, because you can get the pattern down and make a mistake and not have to start from the beginning. The first annoying enemies in this stage are right here. These enemies drop from the ceiling, and when they're about even with you, they shoot out bolts of electricity, and then they quickly run away. You have two strategies. You can either try to avoid the electrical bolts, or try to destroy them before they can actually get to you. I chose to avoid them because it seemed easier than trying to attack them while climbing up the ladder. And here's another area that would be extremely difficult without that rewind feature. This is a spot that Mega Man games have become infamous for, and that are these disappearing blocks. Part of the problem with these blocks is that there's not really a clear direction that you're always supposed to be going in. You don't always jump onto the next block that appears, you sometimes have to wait until your block disappears and the next one appears. So you have to stand and study the screen for a while before you map out your pattern. But once you get it down, you can make it through easily. The problem is, if you didn't have the rewind feature, if you miss, you fall back down into the area where those floaty things that shoot electricity bolts at you reside, and that is not fun at all. And after much more of the same kind of obstacles and patterns to overcome, I reached a spot where I missed something. And this is the reason why, unfortunately, you're going to find out I didn't beat this game in this playthrough. Apparently, I'm supposed to make it through these blocks and grab this. This is the electron beam gun, and what it does is it temporarily gives you a platform to be able to jump across distances you couldn't usually jump. I'll show you where that comes in handy later on. And with Cutman's weapon, I think this is the easiest boss yet. Only 3 hits and he is down. Alright, next we're in Iceman stage, which takes place in an icy, watery cavern. In this stage, you must learn to jump from block to block before they disappear and navigate across an empty chasm on flying platforms that fire at adjacent targets. Starting the stage, you'll encounter these crazy robots. They are robots who, if they're allowed to get close enough to Mega Man, they'll split at the torso, their legs will continue to run at Mega Man, while the upper body will float overhead and dive down to attack you. If you fire your gun while running towards them, you will hit the legs. Destroying the legs leaves the upper body free to fly around. However, if you manage to hit the head before they're split, the entire robot will be destroyed. So be sure to jump off the ground a little bit when you fire in order to hit the head, so that you'll take them out instantly. Next, you'll take a dive into some icy cold water, which doesn't damage you, but just be aware that there's always going to be these constant, I call them flying penguins with propellers on them, that are constantly spawning from the side of the screen no matter where you're at in this stuff. And there's also the evil Roombas on the bottom, so that just makes this area a bit more challenging. Next, you're on to more disappearing platforms. To avoid getting hit every time you fall off the platforms, it's best to take out the evil Roomba on the bottom before you start making your way up. And oh yeah, this is just what this stage needed. Platforms that move around and shoot at you. And the only thing I really don't like about this, other than the fact that you get knocked back when you're shot, if you get hit while you're jumping onto another platform, you will fall through the other platform to your instant death. So by this point, if I'm not justified in using the rewind button, you need to go back and take a look at how many times stuff like this has happened in this game so far. If I would have grabbed that electronic beam gun, this would have helped me a lot in these areas because I could just use the beam gun to cross this chasm rather than having to rely on these moving platforms. And this is the first spot where I really noticed that the game does give you some items that you really are desperately needing after certain difficult parts of the game. So if you make it this far, this area is kind of like a little reward for putting up with all the punishment the game was dealing out previously. Past another big guy on a pogo stick, and we're at the boss on this stage. Rockman's weapon really makes easy work of this boss, and we are thankfully done with this stage. Fireman stage is the shortest of the 6 Robot Masters in this game, but it is also the most dangerous in my opinion. And just to know, unlike some of the other stages in this game, the difficulty of this stage can be reduced by using a specific weapon. With the Ice Slasher in the Iceman stage, it can turn those pillars of flames into temporary platforms that Mega Man can use to reach higher locations. However, you have to jump quickly before the pillars thaw. And because I didn't really master that part of the gameplay, I didn't attempt it in this run-through. But just beware, that is something that you can do in this game. But anyway, you start in this part of the game where these little cannons pop out of the ground and shoot in all directions at you. You have to be kind of close for them to pop up, so you have to actually get up close and destroy them before they start firing. And these little flame balls can get annoying, but you can easily avoid them if you're in an area that allows you a lot of free movement. But since there's a lot of restricted parts in this stage, it's kind of difficult to avoid them sometimes. Again, having the Ice Slasher weapon handy will be helpful. And in this part where this flame elevator thing is, I have no idea how to get through here without taking damage. I just go ahead and take the hit, and then in the second part, you're able to just perfectly time it to avoid damage because you can jump up and fall in the same pattern as the flames are falling. To be perfectly honest, I didn't know I was capable of that when I started this level, and that was just a freak accident when it first happened, but I was able to duplicate it, so it is possible to do if you get the timing mastered. When you finally get to Fireman after making it through this stage, which is incredibly difficult, I find this boss battle can be easy, but it takes some precise timing. I didn't have any sort of defensive move, I just let him hit me. If you hit him with the Ice Slasher quicker than he's able to hit you with his flame gun, then you can easily get through this boss battle with no problem. Now, with all of the Robot Masters defeated, it is time to take on Dr. Wily. This stage starts off with 3 of those big eye enemies, and then you have to clear these blocks to actually get into the fortress. The next part actually has no enemies, you're just actually going to be navigating through the rest of this fortress until you get to the moving platforms. And this is the spot where I'm stuck, because I forgot to go back and get the magnetic beam weapon. So this is as far as my playthrough can get of Mega Man 1. However, the rest of the stage has you go through one giant suit enemy that flies across the screen. And on top of redefeating all of the Robot Masters in one go-around, you also have to fight another enemy, which is kind of like this bubble thing. You have to fight a copycat version of yourself, and then finally you're able to take on Dr. Wily. Alright, so what are my thoughts on the original Mega Man? First, let's talk graphics. For a game of 1987, if you compare it to some of the games that came out beforehand, like in 1986, I'm specifically thinking of a game similar like Metroid. This is a huge leap in graphics quality and appeal. One thing that was different for a lot of early Nintendo games to do was to make backgrounds that were not just static, but somehow interactive. Either they moved, or they had something other than just a plain color in the background. Now, this is something we take for granted today as something that seems like common sense, but Mega Man was really one of the pioneers of making game graphics that look appealing and as detailed as possible. I think that really does show here, so what I'll say about the graphics is that for the time it was definitely great, and I think they have held up over time, although I do appreciate Mega Man's look in the future games more so than I do in this series. But it is the first, so I'm trying not to be too harsh on it. Next, sound. I think the sound effects are done very well in this game, and it's something that, I say if the game has good music or good sound effects, it's not something you should really notice. And I think in this game, the sound effects definitely just kind of blend into the background, and I'm never really in awe of what's going on, but every sound effect really does seem to fit the action. Now that said, I'll say the music is also good. It's not yet at that iconic status that Mega Man games would be known for, especially starting with Mega Man 2, but you can definitely see some of the potential that was there, especially in some of the early themes in the game, as well as Dr. Wily's themes at the end of the game. Next, moving on to the gameplay. So first, you'll notice from the menu screen, there are not that many levels in this game. And even still, once you get to the Dr. Wily levels, there's not that many of them either before the game's actually over. So that is one drawback. And the game's stages would get repetitive because it's pretty much the same thing. You start at the beginning, you work your way towards the end, you defeat the boss. And you have to do that over and over and over again. But here's where the genius of Mega Man comes into play. At the end of each level, you are given a new ability from one of the Robot Masters, and this keeps the gameplay from getting stale, as every single level, up until the boss levels, presents you with a different ability for you to get better at. And in the final stages, you're able to combine your abilities in each level to get through it, using whichever weapons you favor. Some of them will be stronger than others, and it adds to the strategy. It is something that is very simple and easy to understand. You would think that by having so many weapons, it would actually get confusing, but again, because you're going to have to play through some of these levels multiple times, again, the difficulty is something I'll mention here in a second, that actually helps you get better at the game, and it really feels like that you can actually almost measure your growth as a player as you master each level. And now for the last downside, the difficulty. This is both a blessing and a curse, because if the game was too easy, I don't think it would have had the status it has today. But then again, this game is very unforgiving on your jumps. And it's also very unforgiving when you get hit by projectiles and other enemies. And there are several times you will die in this game, and whenever you die so many times, you have to start over from the beginning. Actually, each time you die in the level, you have to start from the beginning of the level until you reach the final boss. So that is something I don't like about the gameplay. I really think there should have been some more checkpoints. It could have made the game just as challenging, but I think what they were going for, because the game was so short, they were trying to extend the amount of time that you would play in this game, even though there wasn't that many levels. So, do I feel that this game is worth collecting for the original Nintendo Entertainment System? I would put this game on the scale of hardcore collectors, and here's a couple reasons why. Number one, because this game didn't sell very well, it is actually a bit more rare and on the pricier side. Combine that with the fact that there are later entries in the series that I think you should play before you play this first one, as they were able to vastly improve the gameplay in the later entries. And if you are going to play this game, I would actually recommend any of the collections that are out for the present day consoles of the PS4, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox, and that is the Mega Man Legacy Collection. In fact, that's the version I find myself playing more often than going back to the original console. I like the original console, specifically because I'm very nostalgic for it, but you don't need to play it on that, especially when you can rewind your gameplay in the Mega Man Legacy Collection. Remember, in the original game, you started out with 3 lives, so if you died 3 times, it was back to the beginning. And that actually makes this game almost impossible for me to beat otherwise. The only way I've beaten this game to date is in the Mega Man Legacy collections that have come out later on. And the fact that you can rewind your gameplay after you miss a jump, or misjudge the distance, or you get hit too many times, or you get hit by the wrong enemy and it just sucks your entire life bar dry, I find that more enjoyable to play than on the original system. Now, those of you out there who are more purists and say that is cheating, I think you're just a glutton for punishment, but there's a certain point where I think the game is actually too difficult to be enjoyable, And the Mega Man Legacy Collection, I think, reflects that, giving you that ability to rewind your gameplay and save wherever you want so you can go back to that save state and continue forward. With little overseas press coverage, save for one full-page advertisement in Nintendo Fan Club News, sales gained momentum over word of mouth, making it a sleeper hit. While Mega Man was not a large commercial accomplishment for Capcom, the company decided to allow the development team to create a sequel, Mega Man 2, for a 1988 Japanese release. Many of the design elements cut from the original Mega Man game due to space limitations were to be included in the follow-up game. Mega Man has been re-released several times since its 1987 debut. A version with enhanced graphics and arranged music was included alongside Mega Man 2 and 3 in the Sega Mega Drive compilation Mega Man The Wily Wars. Another adaptation of the game was released in Japan on PlayStation as a part of the Rockman Complete Works series in 1999. This version also features arranged music in addition to a special Navi mode that directs players in certain portions of the levels. Mega Man was also compiled with 9 other games in a series in North America called the Mega Man Anniversary Collection, released for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube in 2004, as well as the Xbox in 2005. The original NES version of Mega Man was reissued for the Virtual Console on 3 different systems. First on the Wii, then the 3DS, and finally for the Wii U in 2013. An enhanced remake titled Mega Man Powered Up, known as Rockman in Japan, was released worldwide for the PSP in 2006. The game features a graphical overhaul with a 3D chibi-style graphic model with large heads and small bodies. Inafune had originally planned to make Mega Man look this way, but he could not due to the hardware's limitation on the original NES. The game's producer stated that redesigning the character models was a result of the PSP's 16:9 widescreen ratio. The larger heads on the characters allowed the development team to create visible facial expressions. As the size of the remake stages were not proportional to the original, the widescreen ratio also presented the developers with more space to fill. Mega Man Powered Up features 2 styles of gameplay. Old style is comparable to the NES version, aside from the updated presentation, and new style uses the PSP's entire widescreen and contains a storyline with cutscenes, voice acting, altered stage layouts, remixed music, and 3 difficulty modes for each stage. This mode also adds 2 new Robot Masters, Oil Man and Time Man. The NES was originally intended to have a total of 8 Robot Masters, but was cut down to 6 due to the tight schedule. Additionally, the remake lets players unlock and play through the game as the 8 Robot Masters, Roll, and Proto Man. The new stages differ slightly in structure from that of the old style, with some pathways only accessible to specific Robot Masters. Mega Man Powered Up also features the Challenge mode, with 100 challenges to complete, a level editor for creating custom stages, and an option to distribute fan-made levels to the PlayStation Network online service. Mega Man Powered Up received generally positive reviews. However, again, the remake sold poorly at retail and was later released as a paid download to the Japanese PlayStation Network store, as well as bundled with Mega Man Maverick Hunter X in Japan and North America. Though largely overlooked today, as every sequel of Mega Man has greatly improved upon this first version, this game still has its iconic status as being the first in the series. So I would say you should collect this game if you're a hardcore collector. If you're just a casual collector, there are other games you should get before this that are much more readily available, and in my opinion, better than this one. But anyway, that's just my opinion. What do you guys think about this game? If you've played it, let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. Well, that said, that's about going to wrap it up for this video. I will be making a series now on the Mega Man games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. In the next part, I'm going to go over Mega Man 2. So stay tuned for that, and if you want to be notified when that video posts, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. If you're interested in supporting future projects on this channel, please see the link to Patreon in the description below. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.